January 24th, 1925 was significant for at least two reasons. There was a total eclipse that affected the entire eastern seaboard. And in Newark, New Jersey, Avram and Pearl Schwartz welcomed a son.
My mother was born in 1902 on the Lower East Side. She was raised by dutiful, observant parents. Most of her religious education she got from her parents, especially her mother. My father, in the early 1920s, I can't say the exact year, he came to the States, and he ended up in Newark. He didn't have too good a Jewish education in Europe, but he could tell stories about all of the great rabbinic luminaries that came to that town, that passed through. He described them vividly. He didn't tell me stories about athletic heroes. He was not into that. I was raised with that type of background, so I owe them a lot. They were hard-working, very ethical people. In fact, my father once told me, he says, if you're going to be a Rav, a rabbi, make sure that you're honest and ethical. Otherwise, become a peddler.
In the late 1920s, there were more than 80,000 Jews who filled the Orthodox synagogues and Stieblock of Newark. However, there was no Jewish day school. Gedalia's parents were forced to send him to local schools, but they made sure he had a proper Jewish education.
Rabbi Yaakov ben Zion HaKohen Mendelssohn, who was a European Rav in the full sense of the word. That's where I received a very fundamental, basic, what we call Torah education.
He really had an excellent Jewish education, but he attended public school and he graduated from public school. He always was proud of the fact that he won the Latin prize and the chemistry prize, and that he was second in his class of, I think it was 299, but he probably would have been first, except that he had to miss some days due to the Jewish holiday, and unfortunately the teacher, who was Jewish, would not cut him any slack.
With the United States deep within the Second World War, Gedalia entered what would become known as Yeshiva University at the age of 17 and dove immediately into the study of Torah, as well as a continuation of his study of languages and literature.
So it was a great experience at the yeshiva, because there you had a combination of boys, of students from all over the country and other parts of the world.
I went to Yeshiva University, and that's where I met actually Rabbi Gedalia Schwartz. He also studied in yeshiva in my days. He was one class or two classes above me, but we became very, very good friends, and he was the outstanding student in his days.
In 1946, Gedalia graduated cum laude from Yeshiva University and immediately went to work.
I got a summer position as the resident rabbi of the Breakers Hotel in Atlantic City. It was a kosher hotel. And that's where I met my wife from an illustrious rabbinic family in Atlantic City. And the rest is history.
The next 7 years would bring stops in New York, Rhode Island, and Brooklyn, as well as a son, Avram Yeshaya, and a daughter, Rivka Leah. The Schwartz's next stop would be an unlikely but fulfilling one.
And I took this position in a rural area in Englishtown, New Jersey. The borough of Englishtown. That's a step lower officially than a town. They had one main street and a few side streets where the synagogue was. I had a car then with manual shift. I says when I shifted into second, I was out of town. I had a positive experience there. In fact, that's where I completed and published my first rabbinic work, which had the endorsement of the great rabbinic authority, Rabbi Aaron Cutler of blessed memory, who was in Lakewood and established the yeshiva 18 miles from Englishtown.
Later, Rabbi Schwartz would take a position as the rabbi at Young Israel of Borough Park, a prestigious position in the heart of one of the most observant communities in the United States.
I got an offer in '68 to go to the Young Israel of Borough Park. I was there for 18 and a half years. When the people said, how do you feel there? I said, I feel as if I use the expression, I've taken the cork out of the bottle and let my rabbinic training and learning out. And that's where I was able to develop more of my speaking abilities and training, and that's through there being in New York, I became part of the National Bezdin.
In 1986, the Chicago Rabbinical Council would seek out Rabbi Schwartz, placing in front of him a difficult decision as they offered him the position of Av Beis Din.
I remember clearly that my father actually consulted all of us as to whether he should leave Borough Park and accept the position being offered as the Av Beis Din of the Chicago Rabbinical Council.
I was one of the younger members of the search committee looking for a new Av Beis Din for the Chicago Rabbinical Council. We had heard much about Rabbi Schwartz, but we really never believed that we would be able to attract someone of his caliber to our community.
I recall meeting with Rabbi Schwartz along with other members of the committee. I was struck by the tremendous respect that he had for the CRC, for the Chicago Jewish community, and the excitement he had towards his new move to our city.
I remember very fondly his exploratory visits here in '86 and in '87, and it was just wonderful to be able to welcome him to Chicago.
I was at the age when officially, according to Social Security, I could have retired. But I chose to accept that, call it a challenge, to come here. And later on, in 1991, I was appointed to be the head of the National Beis Din.
It's almost inconceivable to think of the Chicago Rabbinical Council without thinking of Rabbi Schwartz's leadership. He's such an integral part of everything about that organization.
Chicago is indeed very fortunate to have had Rabbi Schwartz with them for, I believe, the last 20 years or so, in that he really has put Chicago on the map with regard to its standing in rabbinic circles.
When Rabbi Schwartz came to town, he followed in the great tradition of those who preceded him, great leaders of our community who were part not just of that small sphere of those who were around them, but understood how to reach out to people across the spectrum within the Jewish community, within the general community.
As Eliezer said when asked who he was, he said, "I am Eved Avrom." Rabbi Schwartz sees himself as a servant of the Jewish people. He is quite simply a tzaddik.
He does the yosher and the tov. He does that which is straight and good. And therefore, all of us learn through his actions on how to become a better person, certainly a better rabbi, and most importantly, to become a better Jew.
I found the rabbinic community of our organization is a great, what we call esprit de corps, and I feel very comfortable with them. Not as colleagues, rabbis, but I feel that they are friends. People have always asked me, don't you think of, look what you left in New York, don't you want to go back to Borough Park and all? I says, I don't look back, I go forward.